Hello, and welcome to this seventh lecture of Developing Best Design Idea in this course on winning prototype development. Uh, and I am Arun Singhal, your management coach and mentor with 40 years of experience in people development. So, in this section, we've been talking about how to develop a best design idea for you to develop a winning prototype to help build your business. And in this lecture, we're going to do is we will take forward our discussion on FMEA further and see how can you use FMEA to identify and mitigate the risk associated with a particular product design. And then we will also look at the final step of that. If we have multiple ideas like this, how do we select the best design idea? Right? Ready for that? Wonderful. So this is what you see on your screen is the steps that is we've been talking about in the last lecture about how to carry out the FMEA, right? So in reality, how do we carry out these steps? Do we sit down ourselves or do we do something else? So the best way to carry the FMEA steps is to again work in a cross-functional team, because it requires you to find the possible things that can go wrong, and there could be different people who can see from a different perspective and point that out, and then calculate the risk probability of occurrence and probability of detection, and then develop action plans. So the best is to work in a cross-functional team of design, manufacturing, quality, finance. And it'd be great if you could include your customers and suppliers, right? Because that gives you a very early involvement of suppliers and customers who can then point out what are the possible risks, what are the things that can go wrong, and help you identify the risk associated that way and mitigate the risk. So, and you would have their commitments as well. So once you have collected the team, you could start with obviously briefing about this methodology, FMEA, the steps involved, what are the definition of each of these, and use the templates as illustrated to you on the screen. So step one would be to identify the failure modes and their effects in terms of, we will talk about in what ways can the things go wrong. That can be the question posed to the team, and then brainstorming done and identify the things that can go wrong and populate it in this first step one. Then we say what are the potential failure effects, like if those things do go wrong, what are the impact of that? How will they affect it? And finally, we look at how we kind of rate them on the scale that we had discussed earlier. Then once we have identified the possible failure modes, that we go to step two, in which we identify causes of these failure modes, each of these failure modes, and there could be a variety of techniques that you could use for potential causes. And you list them down what causes can make those things go wrong. And again, then you look at what is the probability of occurrence, right? And then what you look at is what are your current controls, what are the existing controls, and what is the possibility of detection. And so you get all the three parameters of the severity, of the occurrence and detection on the same scale that we talked about in the last lecture. And the third step is relatively easy in terms of prioritization, and that you do by calculating the RPN, which is the multiplication of severity, occurrence and detection, right? So that's the third step. In the fourth step, with the same team, you start looking at identifying corrective actions, and then the team makes a recommendation of what to do. So it looks at if these are the severe failure modes and these are the causes and this is the chances of detection, what are the improvement actions that the team thinks we should take, and you list that down. And once you have taken the last, you probably disperse for some time, and then you start implementing those action plans. Come back and review the second column of the fourth table once again, and where you say what are the actions taken, and as a result of that, how does severity, occurrence and detection stand now? And you do this after completing all the steps. And then again, you calculate the RPN for each of the failure modes that you discussed and see what is the current situation. And there again, if you need to reprioritize the failure modes, you look at it again and you see, is this a manageable risk? Can we handle that? If you can handle that, wonderful, you've completed your task. If not, you go back and do to the same first step and say, okay, what are still the causes and what is the action plan that we need to do? So that's how you can determine this. Let's take a look at the example. And I'm not going to, this is a very populated slide. And this is illustration, and I'm not going to read it through for you. Basically, what it does again is the same thing. It talks about, I'll take one line and read it through. The potential failure mode, in what way things can go, filtered, not replaced after service life. That could be one possible failure mode. And the effect of that would be, impact will be the filtering element becomes ineffective and produces poor quality water, right? And then you rate on the severity, which the team has rated 8 here. There you look at possible causes and you say the causes could be because there is no warning method for user to change the filter. The user doesn't know when the filter life is over and hence is not able to change the filter. And the probability of occurrence, again based on the table that we had said, you rate as 5 and you say what is the current control mechanisms, and there is none, and the detection then becomes 9, that it is very difficult to detect it, right? And then you detect the RPN. Like this, you detect the RPN for all of them and you find that this is the highest, most riskiest failure up mode, and you then work on action plans for this and then take actions and come back and recalculate that, and you find that your RPN you have been able to reduce from 320 to 32, and if that is workable, then you move forward on that. So take a look at this slide when you download this PDF file. Take a look at it in more detail and see the other rows of this to fully understand how to use FMEA to identify the risk and mitigate them, right? So once we have done this identification and mitigation of risk, we now would have maybe a couple of design ideas that we can look at. It could be completely new design ideas, could be one design idea with 2 different combination of materials or a process, etc., etc. So you have now those ideas available. So how do you select them and take it forward? So the way to look at is, well, ultimately at this point of time, you classify you look at the quality delivered by those design ideas and the cost of making them, right? You would have a cost estimation based on the components, the process cost, etc., etc. And you map it on a 2x2 matrix, the famous consulting 2x2 matrix, and in which the horizontal scale talks about the quality. The right hand side quadrant is meeting the quality, left is not meeting the quality, and the vertical axis is the higher versus lower versus the higher cost. So ideally you map all your design solutions in this and you look at where do they belong. Are they meeting the quality, not meeting the quality, at highest cost or the lowest cost, and accordingly map them, and you select those design ideas or options that meet the required quality at the best cost. And you, depending on the need, you could pick 1, 2 or 3 design ideas to take it forward, because as you will see later on, we will need to test this to see which of them is a winning concept and a winning product prototype. And so you need to have multiple options to avoid any possible failures at the later stage. So what do we do in the next module? So having looked at determined the CTQs and understood the design requirements and developed best design ideas now at this point of time, what we will do is, for each of the design idea, we will start identifying what are the component parts and the process that is required to produce them. And we would have some good idea by now during the design phase itself, and we would lay down the design and identify the parts for that. Thank you so much for watching this lecture, the 7th lecture of developing the best design ideas in learning how to develop a winning prototype. I'm sure you are continuing to learn something new, continuing to enjoy, and I look forward to see you again in the next lecture.